Alright, so I'm in the process right now of tuning my compound miter saw. Have you ever ran into that situation before where you just can't get that perfect 90? You know, so you have it all squared off and all of a sudden your cut goes whoop, or this way, or you cut that perfect 90, then all of a sudden the bevel is askew to the left or to the right. In this video, I'll show you a couple remedies that I use to correct this. All right, let's get to it. All right, so my test for 90 is I take my square, I line it up with a fence, and I butt it up against the edge of the saw all the way along, trying to avoid the teeth, right? Because the teeth are going to deviate your whole entire test. So this looks good. But what do I do when this isn't square? I'll show you right now. All right, the first thing I do is remove this fence extension, place it aside. This reveals two Allen bolts that you unscrew. This loosens the fence so you can adjust it, okay? Same thing goes for the other side. All right, so we'll loosen this fence on the opposite end. Same thing. We'll loosen these two bolts. And this will free up the fence so it swivels almost, right? This is a one-piece fence. Some fences are two-piece. In this case, it's one piece. Now let's adjust this fence to the saw blade. All right, I have this camera on a close-up right now. I'm on the left-hand side of the blade. I just want to show you guys what I mean when you want to line up your fence, okay? So we're on the left-hand side right now, and you'll notice a lot of the teeth have a lot of grime on it, like a lot of sawdust and debris that's collected over time, right? Now this test is done probably once a year, okay? So once you have this test locked down and you're anal about it, for the rest of the year, you don't have to do this. But for argument's sake, once a year, test your fence. So you'll see there's a lot of grime and grit. I've also cleaned two teeth that don't have grime or grit or debris that's built up. And this is best for this test. So I'll kind of line up the square to the fence and see where we're at. Well, there's a big gap over here. Why is that? Well, if you look over here, there's a tooth that's in the way and it lines up. But wait a second. So we'll try to get between that tooth over here and press the square against the saw, and there's a gap over here. Well, why is that? Well, you're on this tooth's edge, and there you go. So you got to line it up between the teeth. Now, you don't want to press too hard either, right? See what I'm doing there? I'm pressing against the saw, and this might actually make the saw appear to be more flush than it actually is. All right, so let's just go between the teeth and this tooth too, and just barely touch the saw blade. All right, I'm convinced that this is square. I'll tighten it up and we'll go to the other end. Now that we've tested our saw blade for 90, okay, we want to check the bevel to see whether that's accurate as well. All right, this is my test to make sure that the bevel is square. I take my square, butt it up against the table, press it down. Hold it down, tighten it up, lower my saw blade, and then line up the square between the teeth. Let's see how it is.
Looks pretty good. So what do I do if this isn't square? So if you want to adjust your saw's bevel, you'll notice down here that there's a locking nut. Okay, once you unscrew that locking nut, you have an Allen screw. And this Allen screw, if you look up here, adjusts your left and your right of your bevel. Okay? Now you adjust this left and right of your bevel against your square. Once you achieve square, okay, you lock this nut down, then you adjust this dial. All right, so the next test I'm going to do is test the miter stop. All right, as you can see that this miter stop is set between 30 and 45 degrees. I want this miter stop to be set at 45 degrees. All right, how I'm going to do this is by turning this Allen wrench, okay, to 45 degrees. I'm going to stop when the dial indicator hits 45 degrees. All right, I'm not going to adjust this lock nut yet. I'm going to test this 45 for true. All right, so now I'll test whether or not this angle is actually 45. All right, so I got my 45 here. I got my square butted up against the fence. I'm going to line this square up between the two teeth. All right, so let's give it a shot here. And there we go. It looks pretty square. It seems to be grabbing onto the blade equally along this portion. And I can't, from this angle at least, see any gap. Maybe you guys can see a gap. We'll see. Now that we've tested that the bevel is true, okay, let's test the 45 on the miter to see if it's square. All right, it's locked in. Let's test it for square. All right, so I have my 45 square here. I'm going to test against this saw blade. I'm going to run this square along my fence, and you'll notice that I cleaned off all the saw blade debris here. You'll notice that there's saw blade debris over here and on this side, but I brushed it off where my square is going to be lining up. So let's test it now. All right, that seems pretty square. I'm satisfied with that, but what if it wasn't square? What would I do? All right, this is a little bit of a bird's eye view of the inner mechanisms that control the miter scale to the base, okay? So you'll notice that there's a black rod and a silver rod, okay? This black rod controls the preset stops of the miter saw itself. So you depress it and it locks in. And it stops. Now you can also turn this knob, which is a silver rod, to give you an accurate, tightened stop. And you can also loosen it, and you can continue on your way. All right, so here's a close-up view of the assembly between the scale and the base. All right, so you'll notice that there's a screw over here. Okay, there's another screw on the other side. So if you want to make some micro adjustments, you can adjust these screws between the scale assembly and the base assembly if you feel that you need to actually make ever so slight micro adjustments to the left and to the right.